Hello there. We are going live here
That's
on
right. And we're back.
yeah.
Yeah, last
Maybe
week we had
Wilson
it.
will be showing up. He's teaching a
Hmm.
class right now down at
Yeah.
SVA, I think, a one-day class.
Hmm.
He said,
And
and if he makes it back in time, he'll make an appearance. We can hear about his class.
and Chris is having hobo adventures.
Yes. I don't know if his hobo adventure is tonight or tomorrow morning though, because he's doing an
Yeah.
appearance somewhere.
Yeah, he said he had to be there tomorrow, and he didn't know how to get there.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a joy.
Mhm.
Maybe someone's giving him a ride, maybe not.
Let- Let's hope it's probably not close enough to walk there.
Yeah, I would guess not. Don't know where he's making his appearance, but
Mhm.
uh, he needs a ride there. So we'll see if he gets one. I actually wanted to continue uh, yours and Tim's conversation
Hmm.
about Watchmen.
Yeah.
Only one. I don't know if saw the comment I left over there. You had me
Not yet.
screaming at the screen. Uh, just on one little point
Mhm.
where you were talking about whether Rorschach was the hero
Mhm.
of the Watchmen or not, and whether Alan Moore wanted him to be the hero. And Alan Moore 100% did not want him to be the hero. Uh, Good evening, Comic Crack. He said that. That's more, and like the first Watchmen article I ever read back in like the late 80s. Alan Moore said that he didn't want Rorschach to be the hero of Watchmen, but he wanted him to be repulsive, but he somehow must have failed in that because so many people think he's the hero of Watchmen. He's like, I
Yeah.
must have made him attractive
Yeah. I
because
get, yes. There's intent
right
and outcome, and
there's
the
there's
the the point the
the
point is
evidence of the author and the evidence of the literature.
right. Uh,
Good evening, Eric
hey,
P.
there's Eric P. Eric P. subbed for you valiantly.
He did. I liked his read, rip, and slabs when he was holding up the three
Hmm.
comics. Even though Grotto didn't want to learn anything new, he didn't want to learn about the game. He he fought playing that game until he
And
finally
yeah,
did.
yeah, I don't think I understand. It's like when some of our viewers say, "Oh, I want to read all three." No, you can't read all three. You
That's
have to
not the
pick.
game. And he was like, "Hold on, is slabbing marriage or is slabbing
Yeah,
kissing?" He was
he's
like,
overthinking it.
like it doesn't matter. Could be either one. I never even thought about it before then.
Yeah, no,
But
no,
slabbing could be marriage, or it could be. And I wanted to tell him too that you can break open slabs because he was
yeah,
like,
but it
once
doesn't matter.
it's entombed,
Slabbing
it's
is
gone forever. I'm like, no.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Slabbing is slabbing. You're
Yeah,
you're overthinking it.
yeah,
But Grotto had fun. He
yeah.
had
He
fun,
did.
which is good. Yeah.
He tried to have fun. Sometimes he was having fun despite himself, but he was trying.
Hmm.
It did help distill the essence of the game. Yeah, yeah. It was interesting to think about.
Yeah.
It
But
did.
yeah, I think it was impossible for the readers to not think of Rorschach as the hero,
Mm-hmm.
because Rorschach is the first one who wants
Process
to.
of elimination, first of all.
Yeah, yeah.
Who else would be the hero?
Yeah. You don't. I understand that there's not really a hero there, but there are reasons why people would look at the would read
Right.
the book and have good reason to think he was the hero, and right from the start, because the first one that seems interested in solving a murder, it's
Right.
him. He puts in the legwork, so he deserves to have a happy outcome.
62 lifty lessons. Friday is here. Evening, people. Good evening. Let's see. Comic slapping me more like going to see strippers. That's right. It could be the kiss part. It could be the temporary. That's what Grotto is trying to figure out in his mind.
Yeah.
Which one? And the No, which one was marrying the slaving or was marrying the reading? That
Mm,
it was
yeah, but
interesting.
but
Yeah, and I'd not thought of that before,
yeah,
really.
but Terrence is right. Slabbing is more like going to see strippers. I mean that's what you get from the comic. I mean, you just look, but you don't really have any fun with it.
But anyway, when Tim was brief in the Watchmen talk, was briefly describing, as he said, you can do a whole separate video on this.
Yeah,
Briefly describing why Rorschach was the hero. There was one word in it he used that made me think, which was uncompromising. When he said,
mhm,
something that superheroes generally is uncompromising,
right.
and
Yeah.
that got me thinking. Uncompromising as a compliment is pretty much only aimed at superheroes, because usually and it also um Watchmen was during the 80s, and one of the things that permeates Watchmen is the politics of the era. The Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan politics of the 80s saturates all of Watchmen, as it did a lot of especially British comics at the time.
Hmm.
V for Vendetta, it saturates that too. But it got me thinking, usually when we say uncompromising, it's not heroic.
No.
Because usually who we describe as uncompromising is the religious right, who also is who brought Ronald Reagan to power. I don't know about Margaret Thatcher because I really don't know that much about British politics to know that of that time. But it was the religious right who usually get called uncompromising, and not in a and it's not in a flattering way. They're called uncompromising as a criticism. But in the superhero world, because what is uncompromising? Uncompromising is, in the kind of the real world, uncompromising is, well, I have all the answers and I'm going to act like it. I'm not going to compromise with you because you don't have all the answers. I have all the answers. That's why it goes hand in hand with the religious right, who have faith that they have all the answers.
Well,
But in, but in
there's a
superhero, what was that?
no, there's a romantic appeal here regarding the behavior of superheroes. So,
Yeah. And
uh,
superheroes, they have the answer. It's usually the superhero who has the answer.
right,
So,
exactly. That's the romantic appeal. The
right,
superhero is pure of heart
right,
in his endeavors, and he's there to make things right. And I suppose that Rorschach does think of himself that way, even if
right.
he doesn't look the part. He's not a knight in shining armor.
And Alan Moore may have been thinking of uncompromising in terms of how we think of it in the broader world as not a compliment. But when he brought uncompromising into the superhero story, it became a compliment. So that I think that's one of the ways he went wrong in making well, he was trying to make Rorschach unappealing, but he made him appealing. Because like in a superhero story, uncompromising in a story is when, let's say, you're caught in a burning building with a bunch of people and someone says, we got to get out of here, let's go this way, but you work in the building and you know the building, and you're like, we can't go that way, we store our gasoline that way, we have to go this way where I know an entrance out the basement. And people are like, no, no, we have to go this way. That's when you're uncompromising, because you actually have the answer. And that's what heroes are in comic books. They actually have the answers. So that's when they're uncompromising, and it's a positive thing. And so I think Rorschach just being uncompromising in this story makes him appealing.
Yeah, it definitely it is it. I mean, uh, there are other notions of chivalry, like no, you're not supposed to. Not in chivalry, but after decades of superheroes, where we know that superheroes don't kill,
Right.
and but of course, if you're paying attention to the story, you know that Rorschach has killed. He is
Mm-hmm.
violent, so he's not really pure of heart.
Right.
Uh, but let's see, the Watchmen was very appealing to superhero readers who are
Right.
not used to being put in a position of a moral dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
And one was presented here. I mean, if you want to get down to it, you should be able to defend Ozymandias's actions because he did save the planet. Either he kills 3,000
Mm-hmm.
people in New York, or there's a nuclear exchange and everyone dies.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bit of a Hobson's choice, but
Right.
when it comes to saving lives, it works. But it is
The
gruesome.
trolley problem, I think I
Mhm.
always hear called
Yeah.
now.
Mhm.
But yeah, I
So
found that like, but there is no doubt that Alan Moore did not want him to be the hero consciously.
mhm.
And what's funny is, I've only read The Watchmen twice. I read it as it was coming out, and I read it probably around 1990 after it had all been out. And in between those two times is when I read that whatever interview it was with Alan Moore when he said Rorschach wasn't supposed to be the hero. And when I first read Watchmen, I 100% thought Rorschach was kind of the hero, if not the hero, the kind of most heroic of the gang there. And I can see why. So the second time I read it with that Alan Moore idea in mind that he was, and I could then see where he was and wasn't supposed to be the hero. And I was like, oh, look at that. Because like the first time through, I 100% bought into Rorschach as sort of the hero of the piece, if not the hero, the most sympathetic one. Because, he was a badass. He was abused. He didn't win. He was uncompromising in his ideals. So he was more typical super. And who else is going to be hero? The Blue Beetle guy who is impotent,
Yeah.
literally. And he's no one's going to see him as the hero.
No, to
Doctor
me,
Manhattan who flies off and no.
yeah. No, to me, the Night Owl
That's his name.
was a more appealing character because it was the more human of the bunch. I mean,
Oh yeah, he was
uh,
nicer. He was the
yeah,
guy you'd want to hang out with. You don't want to hang
yeah.
out with Rorschach.
Mhm. But ultimately, he does go along with Rorschach in
Right.
trying
I
to
just don't.
stop Ozymandias.
I I don't think Night Owl was particularly heroic.
No,
He
but
was
he was
more
supposed to
like
be.
the.
Ultimately, Dan Dryberg was put in a position where he had to do what he had to do,
Mhm.
and as any normal person does, okay, I have to fix the leaky the roof is leaking. I have to fix the leaky roof. It's not heroic, but it does need to get done. And in this regard, he had the tools to get to the root of the problem and go with Rorschach and confront Adrian to make sure there was a resolution. Of course, they ultimately had no control over the outcome of the story, but being the human part is important because okay, if you have a problem, you have to fix it, and by it, they ultimately they identify the problem, and Dan is the one who has to go along with it. There's
Mhm.
no delusions of grandeur in his attitude. In a bit, he's doing it to get the girl in a sort of way, but it is in a very high school way because the two people with delusions of grandeur are Rorschach and Ozymandias, and so they they
Because
are they are more apart from humanity that way.
having grown up around a lot of far left types, I tend to see uncompromising as part of ideologies that believe in the ends justify the means. Yeah, I don't buy into that. I don't buy into this far left stuff. I hear that all the time. There is no far left in America. If you grew up in America, there is no far left in America. It just doesn't exist in any way like it does in the rest of the our far left is center in the rest of the world. So I don't necessarily that to me that's a false dichotomy. I hear it all the time. There is no equivalent to the far right in America. We don't nothing on the left has thousands of years of religious tradition behind it. So I just don't buy into that. but I know what you mean. If Rorschach is the hero of Watchmen, who's the hero of 85 Squadron Supreme? I haven't read that in so long that I do not know.
The environment in where the story is told is a bit different. Because you do have the point of the having to rebuild the society. Before the miniseries, the Squadron Supreme appeared in a crossover in the Defenders. Not a crossover; it was a storyline, but and their world. Well, it seemed a bit localized to the United States, but as is typically in superhero stories, the universe is destroyed in the United States.
I remember enjoying the 85 Squadron Supreme. I just haven't read it.
Right. Yeah, I probably read it more often because it was the first trade paperback I bought, and I read it and reread it, and I absolutely loved it. But you do have the point that it's trying to. You need to be a little uncompromising as a leader if you're trying to rebuild society. It just happens that the people who are rebuilding society are not the ones that are going to live in it, because superheroes don't live in the society. They are always a little bit apart. And if you gather a bunch of them and they don't have they don't have an Avengers mention, or they don't have a satellite anymore, because being GLA counterparts, they did have a satellite as well. But they do have their own city out there, which is a bit like functions a little bit like Camelot, and ultimately there's no hero is because the two people fighting, they are fighting more with each other over disagreement than over whatever it is that the squadron is doing to society. They did create some things which trample civil rights, but ultimately what you have is a rivalry between Batman and Superman, which is why Squadron Supreme is usually compared to Kingdom Come.
Right.
And you have the human superhero, with surrounded by artifacts and a few unwilling allies trying to go up against the gods of Olympus. But what you have is two royal houses fighting each other, and it's a bit more medieval that way.
Let's see. Eric P. was explaining himself. I'm talking about people of the White Panthers, whether in the 70s, 80s, that were radical. Yeah, they barely existed. I mean, they were trouble.
Okay, let me put it
to you this way. They barely
existed
in the way that the far right exists. I know who you mean now, but I've never met anyone of that ilk, and I am.
You had nothing like the IRA,
yeah,
like ETA in Spain,
and a lot of our far left,
like the Red Brigade in Italy,
in the Vietnam War.
And and you definitely had nothing like the Bader-Meinhof group from Germany. Yeah. Okay,
nothing. Like our far left is mostly non-existent.
We had several terrorist organizations operating in several European countries throughout the 60s and 70s, and their methods were nothing like you had during the civil rights conflicts.
Let's see. Sometimes the unreliable narrator is easier to root for.
Sure. I mean, the unreliable narrator is echoed in the Black Freighter comic, because you're going along with the character from the Pirate comic is doing, even though it's completely wrong in the end.
Eric P. says, I was in high school when Watchmen was coming out, and Rorschach was the character everybody was talking about. Oh, yeah, no doubt. No, like I said, first time through, I was, when did Watchmen come out? 86?
Yeah.
So I was in college, and he was definitely the character everyone was talking. He was a character everybody he was the cool character. Even though he didn't bathe.
if you put Watchmen besides the all of the movies coming out, the heroes in the movie, in the action movie, in action cinema at the time, they all solve problems by killing the bad guy,
Right.
and with a funny one-liner, which is a bit of a
Hmm.
sociopathic behavior. I mean,
Yeah.
because in a lot of those cases, the motivation was revenge, and disposing of an enemy like that. It's not what you what's expected of you in real life, of course.
I think it also as comic racks here. I always read Rorschach character as a commentary on the fans who would think that kind of sick character would be a hero. See, I think that depends on when you read Watchmen. If you were reading Watchmen as it came out, like Eric P. and I, those thoughts would never be in your head because such a thing didn't exist. If you read Watchmen after Watchmen was already a graphic novel and famous, you might come up with that thought. But I think at the time it was coming out, we weren't really thinking that. That's something that comes with contemplation, I think. And you need time for that kind of content. At least I don't know anyone who was thinking that as it was coming out. And I never read anyone thinking that as it came out. In the 90s, I read people who thought that, especially since Alan Moore had came out and said that, I didn't really want him to be the hero. I repeat, the examples the fringe left went to yeah, that remnants of the group were still active and vocal where I grew up. Oh, wow. They were 100% not the norm, but they were here. Yeah, I've never met anyone in that. I tend to think Rorschach as being much more like the Punisher and thinking solution to crime and social decay is violence. Yeah, I don't even see Rorschach might have even been before the Punisher in that idea. Because I'm trying to think of when the Punisher, because that stuff for the Punisher, I think really developed more in the 90s.
Well, the
The
Punisher,
Punisher was
the
originally
Punisher,
kind of a villain, and then they became kind of a hero.
not quite. I mean,
I don't know.
he was usually set up as the antagonist, and he didn't have
Right.
many solo stories. But the Punisher miniseries with Mike Zeck art, it was also in 1986.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just not sure when I'd nailed down the because he was always just kind of a violent guns guy, but I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone thought much about the Punisher until the night because he didn't make a ton of appearances.
No, they all fit into a 400-page book. If less than 400, under 400-page book, between 1974 and 1984, there's so many Punisher stories that there were. But I think that there's no comparison. There's no comparison there. If you think that Rorschach doesn't think he's wrong, he thinks
Right.
his actions are justified, righteous. The Punisher is aware that he's motivated by revenge,
Right.
and I think he would eventually understand that after killing all the criminals, he will turn his attention on the last criminal, which is himself. There's an understanding that if the Punisher managed to kill every criminal in the world, he would then commit suicide because his mission was done.
Yeah. Comic Crack says, totally understand, Jared. It's tough to type all these thoughts. Yeah. I guess I meant Alan Moore's underlying message with him. Yeah, that could be under. I'm not sure. Well, I don't think Alan Moore really knew what his message because I think, as we said before, he didn't want him to be appealing, and he was. So I'm not sure exactly if I'm not sure if we know. I'll have to see because what Alan Moore. But I can understand you thinking that. Let's say, especially on contemplation. Damien Dyer says I read it twice too, but that was after it was released. Sometime after I watched them. Like I said, I think something like The Watchmen, especially The Watchmen, can be a completely different experience depending on when you read it. I mean, I've known some people who, have read The Watchmen, 20, 30 years after it came out, whatever, and are like, what's the big deal? because comics have become more like the Watchmen over time. So there's not as many. There's not as many sort of new things in the Watchmen that there
Sure.
was in 1986. Eric P. The Punisher miniseries also came out the same time as the Watchmen. He was another character that people were talking about. Yeah. Punisher miniseries didn't stick the landing though, with two different people
Mm. Yeah, but
creating the
you
fifth issue. So that's
yeah,
why.
they were talking about, but they did the same thing that the action heroes were doing in movies, and so you put them
Yeah.
beside Chuck Norris and Patrick Swayze and Arnold and Van Damme and Stallone in Rambo, and it's that type of hero. The hero of the '80s is one who shoots the bad guy in the face while laughing.
And here's something I think Alan Moore also underestimated with superhero readers is we've all heard superhero comics referred to as adolescent power fantasies.
Mhm.
I say we can just remove the word adolescent out of there and just call them power fantasies because most of them are adult power fantasies too.
Yeah, you never really grow out of power fantasies. There's a it's an underlying part of, of human male behavior to uh, want to fix in the face of physical danger. You're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to defeat that physical danger yourself uh, directly.
Right.
So
And I,
that power fantasy is necessary from a biological point of view.
and I would also describe power fantasy as this in terms of most of our life is spent under somebody else's authority, not in a totalitarian sense, but in a we all have to work for a living. So we all have to go to a job and we're under somebody's authority there. Even when we go out into public, we're under society's authority. You know, you have to wear clothes. You're not allowed to go out in public without pants, no matter how much you don't feel like wearing pants that day. You got to go out. You got to put. So we're kind of under their authority too. And I see like superhero power fantasy at its base is having the power to accept nobody's authority but your own. That's kind of what it is when you're, you know, Superman or Batman, you have the final say in what you're on what is and we're also I've also heard it described as we all want some kind of we're not necessarily looking for fairness or justice, but we're looking for some sort of satisfaction.
Mhm.
And that's what the power fantasy is. It's well, if I'm Batman, I don't have to put up with crap. If I'm Superman, I don't have to put up with crap. That doesn't necessarily mean you'd be a villain. It just means if someone says, "Oh, you have to come in and do this job for 8 hours," you're like, "No, I'm a millionaire industrialist. I can just dress up like Batman and do what I want. I'm Superman. I can have a pretend job where I go
Action
in and do
Action Comics
whatever."
#1.
Yeah.
I just fly into the corrupt politician's office. You're coming with me, and put him in front of a judge 5 minutes later, and the judge will try him because I said so.
Yeah, that's pure, and that's what Rorschach. I think that's what people are responding to in Rorschach too. He's the one who, even when he goes to jail, he gives that famous line: "I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me." So
Mhm.
even then, even in jail, he doesn't have to accept the criminal's authority,
Yeah,
and
when
you know he's going to get out, kind of thing.
yeah, and the when the keen when they're showing the outcome of the Keen Act, and they say all
Right.
superheroes must read, and Rorschach delivers the dead pedophile, and never,
Mm-hmm.
I don't answer
Yeah.
to you.
So I think that is what Alan Moore also underestimated is the power of a general power fantasy, which
Mhm.
Rorschach sort of embodied.
Mhm. You can't tell me I can't be a superhero. I want to be a
Yeah,
superhero.
yeah,
You
I'm
can't
a
outlaw me.
superhero. What are you going to do about it?
I'm gonna show up at Josie's bar and break the finger off of a perp.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of almost on the same sort of bent, the power fantasy number 3 came out, and I think sometime during that you described the generals trying to control Dr. Manhattan, and how do you control an atomic bomb who can think, kind of. You said something along those lines, which was the problem with Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen, was that he had real power
Yeah.
that was kind of crazy. And the power fantasy is kind of like if there were 5 Dr. Manhattans in the world, how do they not blow up the world? Because in this issue, because there's it's funny, they give us a timeline in the back. Where is it? Here's a timeline in the back of what happened over the years. But some of these, it's how you get those editorial notes in like old Marvel comics, see Fantastic Four #3 or something like that. Except this is really foreshadowing, because it's like this happened, see issue #10. It's like, well, we're only on issue #3. We can't see issue #10 yet, but it gives us a little glimpse into the future.
Right.
And
Dr. Manhattan has already seen issue #10.
Yeah.
He will react to it in due time.
You'll be able to see. But in this one, it was pretty cool because there was a couple of things revealed. Uh-oh. I picked that up and haven't read it yet. Okay, so I don't want to reveal anything to Eric P. Except for the no pants day on the subway. Well, there's always no pants day on the subway. But in this, we were revealed a few things about the superheroes and about a great destruction that happened in the past. And we learned, like, one of the things we learned this kind of right in the beginning, and it was funny because Sleepy Reader picked up on it in issue 1, but I did not. But one of the characters, one of these atomic powered characters, is an angel. Who and it's funny because I did not pick up. I remember watching Sleepy's video, and he picked up on that in issue 1. He's like, I think some of them are angels and some of them are superheroes. And I was like, angels? I didn't see any angels in there. But it turns out one of the characters is in fact an angel, but she doesn't remember heaven or something. But she's trying to guide humanity too, and things like that. But and then so it's and we got into a little more of the background. Like I said, this comic isn't about giant superhero battles. It's about trying not to have giant superhero battles. And there's also sort of a lower level of superheroes who are called the Atomics, because the atomic age made these but they have nowhere near the power of these Dr. Manhattan level guys. And so, like, one of the little things was, and like in a previous issue, like the United States government, of course, doesn't like these guys because it threatens their power. And I think it was in the very first issue, the United States government, using technology bought from one of these guys, tried to kill another one of these guys and missed, or didn't kill him. And there was repercussions to that. But in here it says, what is it? And this didn't happen yet because this takes place from 1945, the dropping of the bombs. And I think that's when the atomics came about, to 1999 is when it is. Current day is 1999 in this. What in the world have you done? I've gotten DMs to check in on this out. We've been talking more about the Watchmen is what we've been doing.
You'll have to
Um,
go back 20 minutes.
yeah, you have to go back 20 minutes. Specifically, one point that you and Paulo were talking about that you were, I don't want to say wrong on, but you didn't have all the information. From the very beginning, right after Watchmen came out, Alan Moore said he did not. He said, "I didn't. I tried to make Rorschach unappealing, and I didn't want him to be the hero of the book, but I must have done something wrong because everybody sees him as the hero of the book." So that wasn't him coming up with that in 2010 or anything like that. He came up with that in the late 80s. He
I'm tempted
said
to
that.
say he was going to have to find a contemporary magazine with an interview, because I think he remembers
Yeah,
that,
I
Troy.
don't even remember where I read it, but like I said, I know I read it because I read it in between my two Watchmen readings when it came out, and then in 1990. So it was sometime early on. So it wasn't about, and we were discussing, like I said, just because he didn't want to make Rorschach appealing doesn't mean he didn't make Rorschach appealing. There's the evidence of the author and the evidence of the literature, two different things, and they can contradict each other, and that's the way it is. But no, that wasn't anything he came up with later. He was saying that from the beginning. But meanwhile, like one of the things I was talking about, the atomics, 1971, the U.S.'s search for superpower results in the announcement of the Major, the one-man arsenal of democracy. So once again, that's the story that hasn't been told yet. But then it was, this is going to happen in issue 5. That was 1971, was them announcing the Major. 1981, it's discovered the Major is simply not as powerful as the U.S. government claims, and certainly more vulnerable. He is killed by Ray Heavy Harris. Heavy is one of the big Dr. Manhattan power guys who they tried to kill in issue 1, the Heavy. So I found that funny. Just reading the timeline was fun in this one. So this is definitely one to read if you're into Watchmen type stuff. Just like this one is about superpowered guys not to fight so they don't destroy the world. So, matter of fact, Watchmen. Have you ever read? Where is it? Peter Cannon. I know I've showed you this before, but if you're a Watchmen fan, you should also read. Let me come over here.
There was one in '89 or something. Yeah, I haven't read it. No.
Oh crap! I can't find. I think it's Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. Is that the guy's name? Peter Cannon Thunderbolt.
Yeah. He had a series at DC at around '89 or '90, I think.
Now this is the one that. Oh crap! Well, it's done by these same two guys, Kieran Gillen and Casper Wingard.
Okay, yeah, there's a more recent.
Yeah, it's a more recent one, and it's all about Watchmen. It's sort of it's the best Watchmen sequel that I've read. And it's it's a meta commentary on comics too. Kind of about how can we have other influences other than the Watchmen now, please, kind of thing. But it's really well done.
Yeah, that one is actually a regular complaint of Alan Moore, and that one's not just that is pissed off about not making money off of the property. That's actually, from a creative point of view, that's true. You need to look beyond Watchmen in order to keep comics relevant. We can't keep going back to the 1980s.
Right. Arapi says the Power Fantasy issue number 5 is the most recently solicited issue. Current Previews doesn't have a solicit for issue 6. Hopefully they're just taking a break and it's not they're not abandoning it. But there was really I'm really enjoying the Power Fantasy. Which also I have so many comics here because I wasn't here last week, so I have so many tons of comics. What was that other one? Oh, this just reminded me. saying hopefully it's not canceled, because it turns out this is the last issue of Local Man. And they did an Images of Tomorrow thing. Do you remember that from Image Comics?
Yeah.
That was when, I think it was after the first year of Image Comics, around issue 12 or 13, which is where Local Man was at too. Mm-hmm. They did a fast forward to where issue 13 was supposed to come out. Instead, they put out issue 25. And that was supposed to foreshadow where the whole story was good. Like, there was all these dramatic changes in the Image comic. And you're like, and then that year showed you how they got to those changes eventually. And then there was no new issue 25. They just went to 26. So, which I thought was a pretty cool concept, and they executed it pretty well in the Image comics I read. But I was like, but this is up. There's Tim. Tim's coming in because he's got to talk about Watchmen.
There we go.
Boy,
are you just doing Comic Cam?
Are you sure the hurricane didn't hit you? But this was a really good last issue of Local Man, even though it was a surprise last issue, because it showed you everything that was going to happen in a year. And so it gave a nice closure to the whole series, even though they ended on a story. But I was really a little sad to see it go, because I've been enjoying this. Oh, he dropped out. Wow, that Thrill Killer poster is amazing. Let's see. That Power comic caught my eye for sure. The last Peter Cannon I read was kind of hard to get into. I may have reread it. I may have to. If it was the one drawn by Wingard and Kieran Gillen, it was really good. I don't know. Maybe I put it in my Wingard section. Let me see. Where is it? Wrightson, right? Basil Wolverton. I can't find it. My filing system has let me down. I think it is about the printing schedule for the end of the year. Yeah. Tim's back. He was for a minute. Now he's all blurry.
Can you see me?
We can. Were you looking for something in the comic room?
Oh, I'm cleaning up in here. I got home about 6. Wife comes home at 7. The extreme left does not exist.
Not in the United States. It doesn't. Not like it does in Europe. You don't understand what the rest of the world is like.
Trust me, I'm European. You don't have an extreme left or an extreme right.
Antifa, BLM, burning down Portland. I mean,
Portland never burned down. That was all stories. It never happened.
Well, I watched it live on Twitter.
No, we're having riots in Portugal this week.
Oh well, it's not a contest of who wins. It's just they exist. I saw that and I'm like, wait. So I skipped ahead. I heard some Squadron Supreme.
How many police officers and judges were killed in bombings in the United States in the space of a year in the last 50 years? That's many. Right, none.
You saw the fight. I see. This is what's blowing my mind. It was on the news. I mean, like the footage exists of like Antifa busting up stuff.
It was like a 1-block area, and it wasn't. If you actually listened to people who lived there, you could hear it never happened.
They declared like a town square independent, and then they ordered pizzas.
Yeah.
You know there are Antifas around where I live. I've seen them. BLM came to Marion, Virginia, and everybody ignored them. They left.
Antifa was an organization that existed in the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 1930s. The thing you have called
brown shirts, and stuff.
The communist. Affiliated with the Communist Party.
Dude, I'm coming in with 20 minutes. I'm not going to know everything.
Okay. No, the organization you currently have in the United States called Antifa are like, what if the kids from Rugrats were playing at communist revolutionaries?
But they're extreme left. That's what I'm saying. You're talking about like power and what
yes,
they can do. Yeah.
exactly. Rugrats. 2-year-olds are extreme left. They want their provider to give them things now.
Yeah.
They're 2-year-olds.
Okay. You know, I was center left for 20 years.
So,
what was considered left shifted, like a continental shift, and it went and it it's sort of like I was standing where I was, and the next thing I know, I'm around a bunch of white wingers because the extreme left pulled everything that way.
I don't know what world you live in. The Overton window has moved right. That's what.
See, this is what blows my mind. When we have these talks at work, and I have it with my supervisor, and I have everything, we all know what we're talking about. You know, that's what blows my mind about these conversations.
That's blowing my. Do you know what the Overton window is?
Carry on. I was going to talk about Watchmen, but yeah.
Have you ever heard the phrase the Overton window? It was made up by this guy Overton, and it relates to left and right. And the Overton window is generally what's described as what's the current political conversation and what goes on in the current political conversation. And it is generally considered, because Overton is the guy who came up with all this, that the Overton window in the United States has shifted right over the last 30 years, meaning stuff that used to be far right that you would only hear talked about in far right circles is now talked about in mainstream, because the Overton window has shifted so far right that what was once fringe ideas are now mainstream ideas. So the idea, and that's generally accepted.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't have validity,
the idea
but
the
there's
Overton
also
window has shifted left is completely opposite of
see
reality.
that exists. I agree that it exists, but there's also other things that exist, like people saying, like, if you're a young, it used to piss me off. If you're a young Democrat, just wait. When you get older, you'll be Republican. Stuff like that. Like you'll grow out of it. That's kind of what how y'all talking about Antifa a little bit. But Watchmen,
yeah, the left went more centrist over the years for sure. That's generally what we're talking about. So to be clear, my comment was about he's talking about
the left went more centrist. It's called neoliberalism.
Yeah. And then, like, you can just look at the entertainment industry and stuff like that. They're all coming out they're picking their side with the election. It brings out the worst of people, the best of people.
When you say the entertainment industry, you just mean the creative actors, not the money people in the entertainment. The money people in the every corporation is owned by somebody who's right wing. I mean,
Marvel had was it the president? The Marvel Comics
was as far right as you get.
Yeah, and then everybody underneath them were like far left, so they're everywhere. No,
they weren't. But I know them.
See, that's why you have a bias, Jared. You have a bias. These are your friends, your colleagues, your beliefs. You know. But the Watchmen. And this is off the cuff. I got all this stuff out last week. I read this stuff. So Alan Moore either was singing a different tune when Watchmen became big and he did interviews. I've got one where he did it before. I got some where he did this. And it's usually comic scene and amazing history. This is what I was wanting to point out. What it is that I'm not here to prove. I'm not here to like prove I'm right or say anything.
By the way, what year is that?
I'll tell you in a minute. I just wanted to show you. Where I'm here for just a few minutes. I'm not in here to throw an anabomb in here. I thought it was funny. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But this is the stuff I was talking about. You read an article in 1990. No problem.
I don't know. I can't even swear it was 1990, but it was somewhere in the late 80s, 1990.
Yeah.
He said.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reread these articles so to make sure I'm not cherry picking with my memory. You get what I'm saying?
I'm only going by memory, but the reason I remember it was I've only read The Watchmen twice.
Yeah.
Read it as it came out, and I read it again in 1990. And in between those two readings is when I read that Alan Moore comment. So when I first read The Watchmen as it came out, I 100% thought Rorschach was kind of the hero of the piece. I never even contemplated that he was not supposed to be.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
I read that comment the second time I read it, I was like, oh, I can see where he tried to make him unappealing. But I think, and as he said, he failed to make him unappealing.
Where I'm coming from with this, and like I said, I've only got limited time. Okay. The guy that DM'd me he's cracking me up. I know him pretty well, and I was just like, oh my God. But he didn't tell me what was getting talked about. You follow what I'm saying? He's like, you got to check this out. It cracked me up. So I just put up the phone there and I'm listening, and I was like, well, I'm not hearing anything. I think I heard Squadron Supreme there for a minute, and y'all told me to back up. All right. So 1988 Comics Interview number 65, early into the interview. Okay. So bear with me because it's the second page of the interview. Y'all all right if I read a little bit when I find it here in my dark room where the light's in my eye? Let me see here. Wait a minute. See, I think Alan Moore has buyer's remorse, or some people caught him out on the hero's politics. That's what I think. Okay. Let me find it here. They start out talking about the difference between, something about Vet and Rorschach. Then they talk about Rorschach being moral. What we were trying to do with Watchmen was primarily to avoid a sort of baby bird school of moralizing, where the readers sit in their beaks open as they are force-fed certain pre-digested morals by the writer. He had no intent on what these characters want to be according to this. Like, when it comes to it, he wanted the readers, he wanted actual characters. He didn't have an agenda with it. That's what he's saying here. Okay, so then it goes into, instead we invented 6 characters, each of whom are radically different, have a different point of view of the world. Rorschach has a view which is very black, but essentially moral. So he admits, so I can go on because he talks about Vet actually being immoral, with what he's doing.
I think he was moral but unappealing. You don't.
Well, I mean, there's more to read there, but I can read the whole article. But
if you're trying to make them appealing.
Yeah. So what he was doing is that Moore is saying that he even had characters. He didn't agree with their politics, but he made them characters. And that's what their goal was. This is the real world. Here's characters. And even in the end of the book, that was his intent, was to leave it up to the readers what they thought. Just like holding up at the very last page is up to you. So what he did is that he had, in these interviews, and this is all I've ever heard him talk about. I think I said the other night, it was probably, I got to go back and find it, but it's probably been pre-pandemic before I even heard Alan Moore had those feelings about Rorschach now. All the interviews I have, all the YouTube videos where he reads in Rorschach's voice and he gets into where Rorschach came from and the cadence of his voice came from his favorite character and stuff like that. Everything he's done, he's made it sound like the sympathetic hero who is moral but flawed and crazy is Rorschach.
You didn't notice he didn't use the word hero. Just because you're moral doesn't mean you're a hero. But I think he well, hold on. I think he did make Rorschach appealing. I think he did that. I don't think, even if he didn't intend to, he made it. Well, he said he failed in that one. He made him appealing.
I think something happened. I think something happened where he got buyer's remorse, and I don't know. I don't know.
I think he convinced himself. I think his work convinced himself.
Yeah.
He made Rorschach. He tried to make, you can see where he tried to make Rorschach unappealing. Once again, you don't make somebody smelly if you want to make them appealing.
Yet, if you read the essential stuff that you find boring, you read about how he thought his dad was a great man and that was his role model. He had a fictional, I think it was a president or something. He had somebody in his mind who was his dad, and that was a great man. So he tried to be that image of a great man in his crazy brain of what one is. Thus the black and white. My thing is I'm saying Alan Moore is backed up. Maybe he went back and reread his work and his politics became more intense. There's no doubt in my mind that I don't know what they call them in England, their version of what a Democrat is, carpenters, beggars, I don't know, But I think something happened after I think when his daughters got took from him by his love triangle, the two women took off and took his kids, and then DC screwed him over. I think he went to a dark place and learned magic. Okay.
I'm not saying Alan Moore hasn't changed since the 80s.
Yeah.
But,
no, but
I think he now finds Rorschach appealing.
What that interview seems to indicate is that he overestimated the intelligence, or at least the powers of perception of the audience.
Yeah,
he probably thought that it was quite clear that the characters were on a level playing field when it comes to the morality of their actions, and he didn't, because superhero fans are used to having a guy who knows what he's doing and what he needs to do.
Yep. Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. All I'm saying is that his intent with Rorschach is not what has been said, that he never meant that. It was supposed to be somebody people applaud to, but all the stuff I got when it was coming out is, I think it was backwards. But I will say this, it just popped in my head. I'll find it. There's another interview where he was a little bit more disturbed, where there was people that had a certain point of view that thought Vet was the hero, or maybe it could be argued he could be the hero. And that bothered him, that Ozymandias could be, from a point of view, the hero. And I'll find that. I might be misremembering that because it just popped in my head.
I said,
but I explained it. Ozymandias killed 3,000 people to save 5 billion.
Okay. Did you say that tonight?
Yeah,
I didn't hear it before
just before you came in.
Yeah.
What you have is that, considering that nuclear devastation was inevitable, the compromise that Ozymandias came up with was that 3,000 people died to save the world. Nobody asked them.
Yeah, and it's sort of way that fear he has comes from his, where he talked about in that interview in the Essentials, Jared, that that supplemental stuff where he said he studies futurology, and that was like a hobby of his. He studies futurology, which I never heard of ever, never heard anybody else mention, but he studies what could happen in the future. So his studies brought him to the nuclear war because the comedian convinced him in the 60s that, yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, to my buddy that DM'd me, sorry this didn't blow up.
We're just talking here. We're having a good time.
Yeah. I knew what the intent was. I think that there's too used to some. I think they're a little too used to some of the other bigger channels and stuff, like being like, "Oh, here we go." No. But like I said, all my stuff comes from like what I've read, the tone he used. And fairness, I know I heard you say something about 1990. Do you think it is? I think all this stuff I got is from the 80s when it was coming out, and maybe a little bit after it was out. And he announced that he was leaving DC. Yeah.
If that issue's from 1988, it's just after Watchmen ends, so it's still fresh in his mind. You have fans talking, and you will be. Alan Moore would have been aware of them, but at this time, he's still very much in the industry and thinking trying to analyze what he did.
But like I said, he just said that he was just trying to make these characters like sort of true to themselves and make them as real as possible, even when he didn't like their politics. He wasn't out to make Rorschach horrible like he claims. I mean, it's right here,
Well, what it was, it could be that what I read was even a couple of years after that.
Yeah.
And so then he would have had more time to see the effects of Rorschach on fans to whom he became kind of their favorite character. And on contemplation, he may have gone, favorite character? He's not supposed to be the favorite character.
Now, I'll tell you what, I'm not. I'm sorry, go ahead.
He's the character he doesn't quite agree with. So why would he be the favorite character?
Yeah. But at the same time, see, I think I'm going by a lot of his actions more than words I'm hearing. Like, all I've ever heard him do was actually come out and apologize for taking the innocence out of comics, his words. Yeah. And then we came up with the ABC line. You see what I'm saying? His actions was, well, here's some more innocent comics. Let's go back to that magic. That's all I've ever heard him apologize for. Was he actually was disappointed in Watchmen, what I read, because he thought people would read it, comics would elevate it, and all these writers would write stuff that blew Watchmen away, and it never happened. That's all I've ever heard him bitch about, Yeah.
Well, you even before the ABC line, you have that in the 1963 series, because when we get the Image launch, which was primarily motivated by the artists, and so there's not a story behind the properties that were developed. It's more of an indication of that a lot of people glommed on to the more superficial aspects. You can see that in Watchmen. You can also see that in martial law, because all of the characters in martial law are unapologetically destructive of the concept of the superhero, unlike Watchmen.
Yeah, I consider martial law the bastard cousin of Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and that's a whole other conversation, man. And you're already going down that road with it. I'm like, that's the one where I'd be like, oh, he said they didn't like this character and that character. I'd have to be like, okay, I mean, the guy wraps barbed wire around himself to get into, I mean, that's an intense book with a lot of crazy in it, man, and I love it. That's why I got every issue, man. I read that, and it's like looking at an H.R. Geiger picture when I read it. It's
Yeah, but all of those visuals are present in comics at the time, and they all influence the way you think about heroes. So you're going to the leather, the guns, the ultra violence starts happening everywhere. Like when Venom shows up, and by the second appearance, everybody loves Venom. They want more of Venom.
Let me just throw out there, my wife is going to call. She gets off work at 7. She calls. She comes home. I may have to jump off here and just tell her I'm one to talk about Squadron Supreme real quick. But if she calls, if I leave, I got a phone call. I'll be back. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Have you ever seen this one, Best Comics of the Decade, 1980s by Fantagraphics? I forget what this was at. This is Don Simpson and Alan Moore, Pictopia. And this is where Alan Moore basically apologizes for ruining superhero comics.
Okay. See, that's what I've heard. That's what I'm getting at. That's the apologies I've heard for years. And then his actions back that up by, hey, let's do some comics, man, and bring back that innocence,
But I think that, like I said, one of the reasons he thinks he ruined comics is he did not mean to make Rorschach so appealing.
I think, and that's what I think that's the true thing here so we're saying that before what I'm trying to say, not what I'm trying to say from what I read is that he did not go out to make Rorschach unappealing. He tried to make a character that was moral and black and, Steve Ditko influence, all these other things. I don't think he had a plan or agenda to make Rorschach appalling to the reader. I mean, you wouldn't have made him like the main eyes into this world.
I think we weren't supposed to love Rorschach as much as we do.
That's fair. See, now that I can get on with. He regrets I can get that. If there's a regret, and that's where I'm coming from. Buyer's remorse.
I think he specifically tried to make him unlovable, but failed. Because like one of the what started the whole far left, far right thing earlier was one of the words you used that I thought was right on when describing Rorschach is uncompromising.
Yeah. Okay.
And uncompromising is a compliment in the context of superhero stories. But in the context of life, it's generally not. And Watchmen was also written during the Ronald Reagan, Maggie Thatcher era, who Alan Moore was not a Ronald Reagan, Maggie Thatcher fan. And
Maggie Thatcher scared me as a kid.
What was that?
Maggie Thatcher scared me as a kid, but not Reagan. Yeah.
But generally who was seen, this is what got us into a far right, far left conversation, as uncompromising was the far right because of the religious aspect of it. And part of religion is being uncompromising, but often that's not a compliment when you describe someone, because what uncompromising means, I have all the answers and this, so that you don't, so therefore I'm not going to compromise with you. That's what it means in the context of kind of real life.
Okay, I'm glad you brought. Okay,
superheroes. They're the ones with the answers. They usually have the answers. So when a superhero is uncompromising, we see that as something good because the superhero is supposed to have the answer. So I think it may have been something like to Alan Moore writes Rorschach as uncompromising, and he may have even seen that in the context of real life as something bad. But as soon as you put that in the context of Rorschach, we think it's good. We're like, okay, an uncompromising hero. That's what we want. So I think it could, even that could be where he failed, just in his thought process.
Give me just a second here. I'm making sure I understand you here because that's a lot. That's a lot all at once. There's the context of talking about uncompromising, and then there's the context of Rorschach being uncompromising.
Right.
Okay.
And superheroes in general.
Yeah. The thing is that it's sort of like emotions and ice cream. Ice cream is good. Too much will make you sick.
Right. Right.
No emotions are negative. It's what you do with those emotions that's negative. No emotion is bad. Uncompromising is the same way. So there is a context, I think.
Right. But if you meet people in real life who are described as uncompromising, they're probably going to be a pain in the ass.
So let's look at what Rorschach was uncompromising about. Okay. Right. There's a possibility the world has been saved. What is the line? I just lost it. Something built on foundations of bodies or something. What is it?
Civilization is built on the foundation of bodies. Something like that. That's a
utopia built on the foundations of millions of bodies and stuff. A utopia, something like that. I can't believe I'm blanking on the line. And the fact that it's a conspiracy, it's a lie. It's black and white. That's wrong. This is a lie. And that's where it comes up. I was about to read what they said. The last line of Watchmen is that it's up to you, is up to the reader to decide those other, which way you go with what happened, what you just read. The next 10 minutes of they said the next 10 minutes of the reader's thoughts are the most important thing about Watchmen after you read it. So if you go to Doomsday Clock, which is a piece of crap, Jeff Johns wrote it to where Rorschach's journal was read, and they found out that this utopia was fake. Right. That's a possible. Sadly, God bless Gary Frank for all the work he put into the art. That's my feelings on Doomsday. So that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what he was uncompromising about. You're still a murderer. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to get at. The context of what he did.
We see that as good. That's good. As a superhero, you're supposed to be you're supposed to be the one with the answers.
And what happened to Rorschach when he was going to, even in the face of Armageddon, what happened?
He became a martyr.
There you go. And we have martyrs in real life, sir. But no, he's not a martyr to anybody but the people that were there.
Right.
That's
what I'm saying.
I can't believe you got the martyr part, Jared. Well done.
Well, we really don't have a big. It doesn't matter.
But you know what happens. You know what happens when you get a martyr. All of a sudden, when you get a martyr, you make someone a martyr. Their cause is what's elevated. Now they have something to fight for. That's unjust. Yeah.
Once again, that all makes Rorschach a hero, but I don't think Alan Moore meant to make it, because once again, you don't make somebody smelly who's supposed to be appealing.
And then one last question so I can shut my OCD off. So we talked about Vet being the hero, or is he? And that's kind of disturbing. And then we had the idea of the heroes in the real world are human. That's the whole point of it. It deconstructed. It killed the innocence of the idea of a hero. I agree with Paulo on that, or where he's getting at, But the thing about it is what does that make Dr. Manhattan, who, when he finds his humanity again, even for a split second, he murders somebody. And then he talks about going and creating life somewhere. What is that?
It's the same number of atoms.
Yeah. I love that answer. I didn't know where we were going to go with that. But
I didn't hear the answer. What was it?
The same number of atoms.
There we go.
Dr. Manhattan says a dead body and a live body have the same number of atoms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
See, I don't think I find well, I always called it the Dr. Manhattan effect. It was always what I always found most interesting about the Watchmen was the Dr. Manhattan effect, in that they have, like, I always say, like, powers creep, which always happens in comics and everything else, which is the most interesting thing about comic superheroes is their powers. So over time, it's inevitable power creep. The way you make the superhero more interesting is to give him more powers. Or to see his powers. And Magneto is a perfect example. Original Magneto could move metal. He could bend metal. So he'd wave his hand and metal would go here or there.
But even from the beginning, you saw him being able to control objects
energy.
at a very large and at a very large distance. So
it was a blunt
I think Kirby was good at portraying his power in a more subtle way, more like what he did with Xavier.
But it was all powers start out fairly blunt.
You have no idea how happy I am when you went to Magneto. You have no idea. I'm ready for this. Yeah.
But by the time we got to the 70s, when Magneto could control people by the iron in their blood,
they explained that, though.
I know they explained it, but here's my point. Here's how it ties into Dr. Manhattan.
Okay.
If you can control the iron in someone's blood, the first thing you have to be able to do is perceive iron in somebody's blood. We can't do that. That would be a whole other unhuman power, to be able to perceive the iron in your blood. Not only perceive it, but then manipulate it somehow. Which is what.
Did you ever play Dungeons and Dragons, sir?
Very little.
What about Star Wars?
I read a lot of Dungeons and Dragons books, but
what do you know about Star Wars?
A bit. Not
okay. You can be force sensitive.
Okay. I know what that means. But what I liked about Dr. Manhattan is, if you were to suddenly have those perceptions where you could perceive the Molecule Man can manipulate molecules, he's got to be able to perceive molecules to manipulate them. So what happened to Dr. Manhattan? His perceptions became not human, so he stopped being human, which I think is sort of the one time we've seen like the inevitable result. It's like no one else but Watchmen has ever dealt with that Dr. Manhattan effect. Has ever dealt with the fact that your perceptions would suddenly be inhuman.
See, well, this is Paulo. I'm sorry, man. Am I talking over you? I thought I was going to be here 20 minutes, and it's been 30. So I'm sorry, Bob.
Go on.
You sure? Okay. Well, that's the genius of Watchmen, of being.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, that's my favorite part of Watchmen, I think.
The journey, there's actually a journey for Dr. Manhattan. It's that he's got the powers and he's more than human. And Alan Moore is like, what would happen? And he starts losing his humanity. And to keep him happy and to hold on to that humanity, he's got to get laid regularly. And then all of a sudden that bores him. And he's just tired of us frivolous little ants crawling all over him. And he takes off. Then you got to bring him back. And instead of having a human emotion to hit, it's a thermodynamic miracle that brings him back. It was a girl, a piece of ass, came and saved the world, killed Rorschach.
Yes, Friar.
Yeah, that's Howler Mouse.
It's Howler Mouse. That's why it says Howler Mouse under his name, under his face.
So not to just like, abruptly shuffle and stuff, but did somebody ask the question of who the hero is in Squadron Supreme?
Yes, somebody asked that back here. They were like, well, then who's the hero in Squadron Supreme? I was like, we need Tim to tell us, because I haven't read it in a long time.
Yeah, and there's no hero. It's a fight between two royal houses. Nobody wins. Okay.
Howler Mouse's opinion, because I'm not, it's the thing, but the 12th issue, the 12th issue it turns out that Nighthawk he's Batman, and he took them all down. He infiltrated the Suicide Squad with his outsiders, if you will, and a lot of other things that came in there. And I actually got 2 chapters from like 10 years ago or something. I was taking it issue by issue, man, and it got way too political, because what they were doing is they crapped all over the Constitution. They started taking guns, and then that led to things to where they were actually taking the minds of people and brainwashing them with the behavior modifications and stuff, even though they were criminals and stuff like that. And that got abused and yellow. Oh God, what's the Archers? I want to call them by their Justice League names, so just bear with me. But the Archer took the Black Widow because she was in love with Hawkman and behavior mobbed her. She was obsessed with him. Said, "You will always love me." And he had regret. So at the very end of the issue, when everything's going all to hell and stuff like that, he takes down Hyperion. He's taken down the Squadron Supreme because they've taken away everybody's rights to make a utopia. And he said, "You have crapped all over the Constitution. And when you take complete power, you can't control the people in the future that you're going to have to hand that over to, because there's no rules now. Your heroes, who are the next people going to be?" And that's why we have the Constitution, and that's why we have a 4-year president, and that's why we have elections. So nobody holds onto that power, because true power will corrupt. And then all of a sudden, Foxfire runs over there and rots his heart out, and we have our martyr. Batman dies at the end of it after convincing Hyperion that, Hyperion was like, it was kind of like the end of Clerks, where Dante didn't know which girl to go with, because he wanted the girl that cheated on him. And Silent Bob went, there's a million fine women out in the world. Most of them just cheat on you. They don't bring you lasagna to work. And Dante went, "Oh shit, he's right. I love her." That was the ending of that was Squadron Supreme. But yeah, so Nighthawk ended up not only being the hero, but he became a martyr as well,
And here, Eric P says, "So Silk Spectre is the hero of Watchmen?" Actually, one of the things I was thinking about, and like I said, I haven't read Watchmen in a long time, but my memory of it was most of the female superheroes in Watchmen were abused. I mean, they were.
Yeah.
So it is actually tough for an abused woman to be a hero of a superhero story.
Well, it's also the life of men is violent. Okay, we are so used to it, we forget it. Bad things happen to men too. Bad things happen to women, but we are wired, because they have the babies, and that makes people angry. We are wired to protect women because they have the kids. Women don't go out on a cliff to get the berries to feed everybody because they're hesitant, because they have to protect themselves to have the babies. It's all so we continue as a species. And that makes us forget that women are not always they're not always victims. I mean, even if I saw Law and Order where they were training people, and the girl got shot in a training because she thought the girl was the victim, not with the gang. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Terrible things happen in the real world, but we have a bigger emotional response to women. Men are replaceable. Look at a wedding. George Carlin pointed it out. At a wedding, you have the bridesmaids, you have the bride. All the men are dressed the same. If the groom dies right there on the spot, just everybody step to the left. I'll be back. My wife is calling, if that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what else. I have so many comics. I have to show you this one just because I really liked it. Tom Scioli, Godzilla's Monster Piece Theater.
Yeah,
this one almost slipped by me, even though Wilson told me about it ages ago. It's got The Machinist, who's I think H.G. Wells, The Great Gatsby, Sherlock Holmes. I believe that's Dracula in the cape with the D on it. But I have to say, he really pulled this off. I mean, what I especially liked that he did on it was he used direct quotes from the Great Gatsby book in new contexts. So it starts out like this whole first page is all quotes directly from The Great Gatsby, and it's about Gatsby meeting Daisy. It happens in the middle of the book, and then we get, he goes into a few pages, the big Gatsby parties, and then where is it? Godzilla attacks Gatsby's party.
Sure, why not?
Why not? And Gatsby gets out in his speedboat to try to find Daisy and see what's going on out there with Godzilla, and he just all through, like, all this type stuff is direct quotes from the Great Gatsby novel, but recontextualized. So it's like, what do we have here? He actually takes like a quote from the end of Gatsby as he's trying to rush across the bay to get Daisy. We get a quote from like the end of the book. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes us. It eludes us then, but no matter. Tomorrow we'll run faster, stretch out our arms further. And that's like the most famous quote kind of from the end of Gatsby, but he uses it here as Gatsby's running down the dock trying to save Daisy. So he really did a good job recontextualizing some of these Gatsby quotes as he fights Godzilla. And and he creates there's a funny line in here too. Like here it, like at the end here, this is a quote also from the end of Gatsby, where he's waxing poetic about the first Dutch sailors who ever looked at Long Island and the awe they must have felt. But he's applying it to Godzilla. So it was really cleverly done the way he used the quotes. He obviously knows the book pretty well. And there's a great quote here too, because now we've got Sherlock Holmes shows up near the end of this issue. It's not the end of the story. What does he say? I can help. This is what Gatsby. I can help. My G-force is anchored in international waters. I have no jurisdiction here. And then where is it? G-force, you say? Short for Gatsby? You named your private army after yourself? Gatsby's like, well, I had to name it something. I just find that funny that Sherlock Holmes calls him out on, but really nicely done. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, because I was like, it's kind of a goofy, fun, but he really did a nice job with this story. He pulled it together for him. Like, there's, once again, it's a quote from Gatsby when they're first entering the Queensboro, there's a quote about the Queensboro Bridge when they're first entering Manhattan, Gatsby and I forgot his name, the narrator. So he's given us the same quote as Godzilla wrecks the Queensboro Bridge. So I gotta say, he pulled it off better than I ever thought he would. This is a Godzilla fighting the Great Gatsby, H.G. Wells, Sherlock Holmes, and Dracula. Dracula hasn't shown up yet, but he's in the end coming in. So it was really nicely done. I have to say, I'm happy with
that. Is that an homage to Fantastic Four #1 on the cover?
I believe it is.
Oh, wow.
And there's of course 4 covers. But I'm glad, like I said, this one actually slipped by me. Luckily, there was a shelf copy. Because, Wilson noticed this one like months ago when it was first announced. Whoa, I didn't see that Godzilla book at the shop. Gonna have to find that one. Yeah, that one's cool. Godzilla Masterpiece is one of the highlights of this week's books. It sure was. They'd really done. Jared, art also looks like, Tom Scioli's can at times look a little like mine. A reminder, they have Eddie Brock, Carnage #1, Chris G. Russo out. I think I can't remember. I think that's there's so many Venom comics, and Chris has been doing covers for a lot of them. That I think that's a third series that he's doing covers for. So I think there was another one last week.
I don't know what's going on with that movie, but there's a guy on Twitter. His whole review was just him sticking the middle finger up to the movie poster after he left the movies. And people are like, I can't wait to see the review. So I don't know who he is, but apparently he's a big YouTube movie guy, and that was his response to the movie. So
Tom Scioli has a video chat on his channel about Gatsby. I'll have to check that one out. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm going to soon.
Oh, nice.
So what other Watchmen thoughts did you have, Tim? Let's see if I got any other.
Did anybody have any questions about either one? The Squadron Supreme? I never get to talk about Squadron Supreme. When I started talking about the Second Amendment on my video, when I got to like the second or third issue where they are actually stockpiling them and burnt and melting them down and stuff. And oh man, I mean, that was one of the first times I deleted comments, man. I was just like, what a bunch of idiots. It's I'm like, this is fiction, So
regarding Squadron Supreme, I don't accept that Nighthawk is a hero there, because everything that happens in that miniseries that goes wrong, it's Nighthawk's fault, because he leaves the team in issue number 1 just because he lost a vote. Mm-hmm. And if you really wanted to keep the squadron in line and prevent them from misusing from having dumb ideas, you would have stayed. But no, he went. Well, he left the group in the first. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them.
Well, he knew what they were doing. He knew what they were doing. He tried to warn them, and I don't disagree with you, Paulo. I'm just looking at it from all sides. But he had a chance to use the kryptonite bullet on Hyperion on they were in Washington in front of some big monument when they unmasked to get the world to America to trust them. And he was gonna Ruby him right there, and he decided not to do it and found another way. So yeah, I think I want to read Squadron Supreme. We need to. I think if you're up for it,
I would like to read that. I haven't read it since the 80s. I don't think I have my copies of it. I'm going to track one down.
Well, it was my Watchmen. That's what I got off the stands because we didn't have.
Yeah,
they came out before Watchmen.
That before it was your.
Oh God!
See,
and I've got to reread all these because there's an interview with Mark Grunwald in one where he said that he got calls or told that where Squadron Supreme got out first. He touched on some things on this book by Alan Moore called Watchmen. Some people at DC are nervous because he got his out first. Yeah, it just popped in my head. Yeah.
Let's check out some of these Watchmen comics from back here. I also thought Rorschach was a riff on Ditko and his worldview, says Eric P.
That's everything. Yeah. Everybody thought it was the Question. It was later on that people realized it was also Mr. A. It's still Ditko. That's a Ditko character through and through. Yeah.
I don't think many people had read Mr. A when the Watchmen came out.
That's the book that pisses me off when I read it. What a self-righteous bastard. But anyway.
Nicely drawn, though. Man, Ditko's got some. Comic Crack says it's an interesting idea that comedian led him to thinking there was going to be a nuclear war.
Who did he do that to? Oh, in the Crime Busters, meeting of the Crime Busters. Yeah. Well, he said it all goes up in flames. And Captain Metropolis, he's right. To me, the comedian had a superpower because we would get these comic book tropes with our heroes. And when the comedian spoke up, he was that blaring. He was like he was reality hitting them. You have these ideals. Well, let me tell you what the real world's like there, son. Blowing smoke in their face, Yeah.
Tipped Goblin wants to change the subject. Inviting cool markers lately? No, it's okay. We can argue. We can argue. It's fine.
No, talk about markers.
Andy's got some cool markers.
We got it all, man. We got it all.
We are not talking about markers. We are not talking about erasers. We are not talking about microdots or whatever.
That's my marker art. That's a copy of my marker art. That's a print of my marker art. Yeah.
Nice. Undead Quinn, we can all blame Alan Moore deconstruction for all the damage it did. Yeah. Like I said, Alan Moore blamed himself for it here. If you've never read this story, it's worth a read. I forget where it originally appeared in some anthology, maybe even one of those Steve Gerber Money for Him ones. But it's Don Simpson and Alan Moore called Pictopia. I think it won some awards at the. It's all about this this guy, this magician here, and he's a superhero living in this superhero town, and he keeps looking at out at the horizon and sees the horizon is like getting closer, and people, all these superheroes, sort of Silver Ages type superheroes that he knew, keep showing up in darker and more violent versions of themselves. And that's what's happening to Pictopia, is everybody's being changed. Here, over in Toontown, they kicked one of the Toons to death. So it's a really dark story about.
It actually came out as Watchmen was still coming out. So that story first appeared in a Fantagraphics anthology called Anything Goes.
That's it. Anything Goes. Yeah, because that's where I first read it.
But that's from 1986, so he would not be aware of the effects of Watchmen yet.
He was.
No, but he would be. I mean, this came out in December 86.
I'm telling you, if you read this story, he's very aware. There's no doubt about that. Eric P., what would have Rorschach less appealing? I think people had empathy due to whose back. I don't. The other thing you missed, Tim, let me quickly tell you this, was one of my ideas was Alan Moore. Comics are often called adolescent power fantasies, and I'll take the word adolescent right out of there. They're just power fantasies.
No, it's like Doctor Who. Their roots should always be for the kid, So,
but I think he underestimated how powerful power fantasies are, because we all live our lives under somebody else's authority, not in a totalitarian way, but in you got to go to work, so you got to listen to people. You got to go when you're out. You're under society's authority. Here's where you can't wear pants. I mean, you have to wear pants when you're out. That's one of the rules. We're always under something. And to me, like, the very basis of a power authority, of a power fantasy, is the ability to not have to accept anybody's authority but your own. And that's what superheroes often are. I'm Batman. I don't have to listen to you. I'm Rorschach. I don't have to listen to you.
Well, that with comic books, though, we get that introspective. We can see in their head through their thought balloons.
It's more complex than that.
Yeah, and you're right.
At the very base, and I think if you're doing like superheroes like Rorschach, it's tough to get rid of it's tough to make that less appealing.
Well, there's another thing about the 80s you're forgetting. If you were there, and I want you to think about this, right? Okay. A lot of the movies were always about the little guy winning out over the big guy.
Right. The Rocky story was ruling still.
The underdog, right? So when they came out, you got Rorschach. You put him beside a vet, Ozymandias. And I pointed this out the other night. There he is. This guy has it all. He's wearing the villain color of purple. That's the villain color, purple and green. Only, who did I say? Paulo, Prince and the Hulk. Only characters that get by wearing purple. Okay. Yeah. And then you have Rorschach, who was nothing. Like not even soap. You know what I mean? Like nothing. Then they make him a sympathetic character because his mom was literally a whore and he didn't have a dad and he got beat up. And when he fights back and bites that kid in the face, because he's poor white trash with a whore mom, nobody wants to help the little kid who's just defending himself, even though he's messed up. So he is what society made him to be, is another way to look at it, Right. Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways to go with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's one interpretation.
Sometimes that doesn't engender sympathy, though.
Right.
Sometimes
that's one take on it.
Bad background and they become a serial killer. We're like, well, not everybody with a bad background becomes a serial killer. So I'm just trying to think. What could they have done to make him less appealing? Amazingly, I think the thing that makes him the least appealing is the fact that they made him smelly.
Yeah.
It is amazing
Take the fact that
that little thing,
unclean,
unclean, can make
paranoid, paranoid.
if they had emphasized his smelliness more, I
Here's what
think
they
would have made him less appealing.
just an idea of what made him more unappealing, because I remember Paulo and I talked about this. When he did kill, he
Right.
killed a pedophile. Who is going to come and say, "Oh, he shouldn't have killed the pedophile"? You see what I'm saying? When he killed the right people. You follow what I'm saying? And allegedly, let me get that out there. I don't want the YouTube gods to come after me, But in the book, in the story, he killed the right people. That's what broke him. That's what made him a killer.
The substitute phrase we use for that now on social media is PDF file.
PDFs. There we go. Gotcha.
PDF file. I guess that makes the algorithm not block things.
Yeah.
So at least I noticed people using that on. I was like, "Oh, he was a PDF file," and I'm like, "Okay, I get what you're doing."
I mean, seriously, if you wanted to really, what they needed to do to make him more appealing is to try to make them what they tried to portray him as in the Watchmen TV show, which was ridiculous. He replaced the KKK more or less with Watchmen mask.
That is the
and that was ridiculous. That was ridiculous.
The way to make somebody less appealing is to make him a racist. That's
what I'm saying. And it's lazy writing. It's lazy. Now, back then, that would have been like, oh my God. You know what I mean?
Even do you know, even in The Great Gatsby, written in 1922, the way they establish that Tom is sort of the unsympathetic character is to make him racist. So it's
my 30-year-old copy.
It's amazing to me that trope was there in 1922, because nowadays it's used all the time. If you want shorthand for this guy is evil, make him a racist. It's like you need no other explanation.
I wonder when the trope hit that it was the South that's like super racist, because it's everywhere and it's spread out. You know what I mean?
Tom was from Chicago, I think, originally, not even in Gatsby. But it's like, I wonder when that trope, because I can't imagine that trope was everywhere in 1922, because the USA was probably a much more racist country. We need. I have to show you this quickly. We need some European comics about. Kim probably hasn't seen this before, but one of my comments about Penthouse Comics, which I'm enjoying thoroughly, is they're just European comics. It's like I think there's like 5 or 6, European comics that they cut up and give you every month. But at least 2, if not 3 of them are dealing with racism in the USA in like, I think one takes place in the 40s, one takes place in the 60s. And I'm like, and it's just fascinating to me that's European writers are the ones dealing with that subject, when American writers, especially, and I mean, not in comics, certainly don't. So I find it funny that European writers are writing stories that deal with racism in the USA, 50 years ago.
And it's European. It's a European script. See, Paulo and I were talking. Eric P needs to go by Howler Mouse channel and watch the last live show Paulo and I did on the Watchmen stuff, because this kind of got brought up a little bit what I'm about to say. Paulo, if I remember right, didn't we talk about how Watchmen is made by 2 English guys? And we got to remember that it's sort of like this is their view of America to a certain extent. So that fits, with what you're saying, Jared. Yeah. Seeing people from the outside and giving them a fair shake makes the people that you're looking at and writing about, it can make them look at themselves,
It's really contemplative too. There's 2 stories, at least 2, that are about, oh, look, balloons, that are about white passing black men and them wanting to get even.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one is trying to get even and the bad things he's doing to get even, and the other is about a white passing black man who doesn't want to lose his privilege when his black brother shows up who wants stuff from him. So it's like there's really complex stories that delve into self-identity and race.
When I was getting my bachelor's, when when I was reading my bachelor's in social work and it came to social issues and neglect, and there's actual books that were horrible to read. Like I even complained, like, how'd you expect me to finish that? But the authors always tried to claim these were true stories. And so when it comes to like social issues and books like that, reading those kind of books for almost a year, I have to know if they're based on fact, what the authors. It's one of the things where I can't depend on the work on its own. I got to know a little bit about the author. Where are you getting this from? Because it really can exaggerate things, misrepresent what's going on, martyr people that don't need to be martyred. I have people who were mad at me because of how I feel about Maya Angelou. I'm like, when you talk about going, she lived 3 hours from me. That's what's funny.
I've seen rapping Tom Hardy. I set him out. Okay. I think this has to do with Tom Scioli's Gatsby channel. The film series lost its point. Yeah, the Gatsby film. I like, if you're talking about the Gatsby films, to me, one of the main points of The Great Gatsby is that he wasn't great. He was a glorious failure, Gatsby. That's kind of, if you were to ask me to describe the character of Gatsby, he was a glorious failure.
I think it was the mystery of who he was, and then when we found out who he was, we were disappointed. Wasn't he like from the dust fields of Kansas, if I remember right? Or something?
He didn't achieve it. He didn't get Daisy. He ended up dead. He was a glorious failure. And I don't think the movies captured the books very well, but they were glorious failures. They put everything on the screen, especially that 2013 one. It was like,
do you know why I read? It just dawned on me. Do you know why I finally tracked down The Great Gatsby and read it? For years, I thought it was because I had a community college class.
Yeah,
I read it because of Animal Man. At the end of Animal Man, a light comes on in Grant Morrison's last issue while he looks across the lake. And I was like, that's Gatsby, because I knew just enough about Gatsby about that light. You know what I mean?
The green light, the eternal
Oh,
promise.
my God. Yeah.
But here's my current observation on Gatsby, by the way. One of the reasons I like it. If you live long enough, you will be every main character in Gatsby.
Yeah.
You will be Nick, the narrator, the observer, the what's going on. You will be Gatsby, the guy who thinks he's ahead and will be a glorious failure at some time. You will be Daisy, the sort of princess who is smart but taken care of and kind of manipulative. You will be Jordan Baker, who kind of observes things and is cynical about them. You'll probably even be Tom, the asshole.
Yeah. Yep. That projection is that projection on the characters means they have some great characters.
Right.
But I'll tell you the one that I'm surprised at. You ever seen The Burbs with Tom Hanks?
Oh yeah. Not in the wild.
At 17, I was Corey Feldman. I had been Tom Hanks, and I'm turning into the crazy ex-military guy in the neighborhood. I've got the crazy family across the road. They broke me, man. They broke me, and now I'm like, anyway. Guys, I have to go. I got 15% on my phone. I'm gonna go.
One more Watchmen comment. Will I be kicked out of the clubhouse if I say that all the before Watchmen series are beautiful, respectful homages to Alan Moore?
Yes.
Sorry.
I had a talk with Amanda Connor about her Silk Spectre series, and I pissed her off and then reined her back in. Darwin Cook did all right, but I tell you what, man, that Night Owl miniseries and the Rorschach miniseries and the Comedian miniseries, absolute garbage, man. I was like, oh my God. There's some redeeming qualities, but overall, I steer a little bit more towards Paulo,
Gordeval says, evening. Hey, it's Tim.
Good evening. Yeah, we got to get Gore. We got to get a story. Got to get Gore on the channel. Got to get Shannon on the channel. I'm leaving for a cruise the 7th of November. So I'll try to do a few more things. But guys, I really do have to go. The wife's going to be home in 15 minutes after a work day. All I got to do is heat up the dinner I made. And I got 14% on my phone. It's a good time, Great to see everybody. See y'all later.
Let's see. Well, I haven't. The only after Gatsby one I really read, I think, was I read like the first 2 issues of Doomsday Clock. And though extremely well crafted, the first thing they had to do, I remember, was kind of unwind all of Watchmen. Kind of like take everything Watchmen was about and say, ignore that. We have to make Rorschach alive again, and we have to do that. It was like they had to ignore everything Watchmen was about in order to continue Watchmen. So it was a little, This is the Dexter debate. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, SBPT is going to meet Joe Rubinstein tomorrow. He's here in Portugal. So he's going to get his copy of the Portuguese edition of the Wolverine miniseries signed.
Pretty much what the said about the Gatsby. I want to check out the Wire. I saw the Wire. I don't remember them ever talking about Gatsby, but meeting Joe Rubinstein makes me. There's another thing I got this week. And I got Bill Sienkiewicz's Mutants, Knights, and Assassins. This is the artisan version of the artist edition of Bill Sienkiewicz. And I got this because my friend Ed, who teaches at FIT, that's the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Here we go. In season 2, there's a prison book club where they talk about Gatsby. Okay, in the Wire. Check that out. But my friend Ed teaches at FIT, and he got Bill Sienkiewicz in to do a speech because FIT is a state school, and they have a huge campus with auditoriums galore in it and budgets to get speakers in. So he managed to get Bill Sienkiewicz to come in and speak to all the FIT students, and I brought my class there too. Well, they actually brought me. They're like, Ed's getting us into this FIT lecture. Can we make it a field trip? Otherwise, we're all going to miss class. I was like, all right, it's a field trip. And I realized I didn't have like a Sienkiewicz art book to show them, because I wanted to talk to them about his work before we went there too. So I bought this, and it was only about $25 on Amazon, and brought it with me and showed my students, and they all got to see some. And he talked for. I actually had to leave before. I mean, we're in some auditorium in FIT. And I got to say, those seats, I don't sit for that long usually. This is about as long as I sit ever. And as you can see, I got up a few times during the show. Mm-hmm. And this chair is more comfortable than that auditorium seat. But I left after about 2.5 hours because I had a train to catch and wanted to get home. So he was talking for that long, and it was all good. I mean, he wasn't boring at all, but it was just like that after about an hour, that auditorium seat was hurting my butt so much that I was like, I still feel bruised over there just sitting here now. I kept shifting back and forth. I was holding myself up with my arms, which made my back hurt later on. But I was just like, I was like in pain, and I couldn't get up and move around because I'm in an auditorium seat. A big book, not the biggest book I got this week, but a big book. But Bill Sienkiewicz talked, and I bike. Yeah, I was like, it was killing me. Like I said, he talked for an hour and a half that I was there. Finally, I was like, I think they're ending in a few minutes too. I'm like, I got to go catch a train, and I cannot sit here 1 minute longer. But he talked about his career. He talked about, individual pieces he had up there. He took all the questions from the students that they wanted to ask. It did a really nice, and he said it more than once, said it a few. He was so excited to talk to students. because he's like, well, I'm not done yet, but you guys, I still got work to do, but it's nice to actually talk to students and talk to people who are the future of illustration and art. And I have to say, most students want to know one thing. And it's an impossible question to answer, and they don't always ask it bluntly. But the question is always, how do I get to be you? How do I get to be successful? To which there is no answer, of course. But that's what every illustration or art student wants to know. Because they want to know the path. But unfortunately, there is no. And so,
Sure. I don't know where I saw it, but I think once a professional described every time you find an opening to the comic book industry, they close that up after one person comes in.
Mm-hmm. He even said, luck could have a lot to do with it too. Because he got in. Well, first of all, it helps to be as talented as Bill Sienkiewicz was at 21. Mm-hmm. Almost nobody is. And he said first he went into DC, and they're like, "Wow, we really like your stuff. We got no work for you, but go talk to Neil Adams," because Neil Adams was in that day. So he went over and talked to Neil Adams, and Neil Adams called up Marvel and said, "I'm getting you in to talk at Marvel." And Bill was like, he thought he was going to go into Marvel and they were going to give him a critique and tell him to come back in a couple of years. Instead, they gave him a Moon Knight assignment.
And sometimes it's that easy. Eh?
So he's like, I often wonder about what would happen if I was there the day before and Neil Adams wasn't there that day.
Yeah.
He's like, so, luck can have a lot to do with it too. Let me recap quickly for Gore Vidal. I missed it earlier. Did you pick up the Gatsby Godzilla comic? I saw it at my shop this week, but I didn't buy it. I really liked it. It exceeded my expectations. And what I really liked about it is he took direct Gatsby quotes and took direct language from and recontextualized it. He just picked quotes where they used. Here's another one. Here is Nick and Gatsby are going to meet Thomas Edison because Gatsby wants to form his G-force and he wants Thomas and Edison to make him special stuff for his G-force. And here's as he's trying to charm Thomas Edison to get stuff out of him, it gives us the direct quote from Gatsby where Nick first meets him and he describes Gatsby's smile. He had one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced or seemed to face the whole external world for an instant, and then it concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor, and it understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you just as you would like to believe in yourself, which is just a brilliant description of somebody's smile. And it was perfectly recontextualized in Gatsby trying to charm Thomas Edison. So I have to say, I really, really liked this. Go and pick it up. See how you like it, because I think he did a terrific job with it, better than I expected. Crossing fingers, Paulo, but I might lose the opportunity to meet Malieve and Joe. I'm trying to take my kid with me for the first time, and her mom is afraid of the riots that are occurring nearby.
The riots are occurring mostly at night. Also, the comic book festival is near a local soccer club, and on Saturdays or Sundays they will have the either the under 13s or the under 16s playing an official match. So there will be kids with parents for the soccer match in the area, so it won't really be dangerous.
That's good to hear. Gore Vidal, that's interesting. I'll have to pick it up. You've just charmed me via Fitzgerald. There we go. That's same for musicians, right? There's no that. How do I get to be you? Bill did straight. He actually showed us all some of his Straight Toasters artwork. That's still something he
I've never read Straight Toasters.
What was that? I read it, but I haven't read it since '88, and I don't still have. I'm gonna have to track that one down again. I'm gonna write down Straight Toasters, and here's something I wanted to ask Paulo about. Straight Toasters and Squadron Supreme.
Mm-hmm. I think now the Squadron Supreme trade will have the graphic novel sequel inside the trade as well. I bought the graphic novel independently, because I have the trade with Grunwald's blood.
I wanted to ask you about a book I saw at the comic shop. It was obviously European, by Alien Books, called I, Dragon. Have you heard of that one?
I, Dragon? No.
I think they mentioned it was by the Meta Barons. I don't know if it was writer or artist, but it's Dragons. Just came out from Alien Books. It was in the European graphic novel format, one of 3. It looked pretty cool. I was actually thinking about picking it up, but it was like $13, and I went 3 times 13, that's $40. I'll wait and see if it comes out in, a hardcover edition or whatever for less. I'm gonna be the asshole with that one. But I was just like, why this one? Why Alien Books? Why this one? Sometimes I just like random European, because we get so little, European stuff over here in our comic shops. That it's like, why did this one make it?
Okay,
I was wondering if you knew anything about it.
No, I don't see anything with dragons here in Jodorowsky's bibliography. The last book that he did.
Go to alienbooks.com or whatever and look it up. That might be easier.
Alienbooks.com.
That felt like a test for sales if he passed. The Straight Toasters. If I remember correctly, Bill said he worked on Straight Toasters after his marriage broke up. He actually had there it is. I, Dragon, book 1 by Juan Jimenez, the Meta Barons and Heavy Metal. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. That'll be old then, because Jimenez died a few years ago.
Yeah, I figured it had to be old because they have it coming out monthly. 3 issues. Straight Toasters was a scratchy crime murder drama. Jimenez, the artist from Meta Barons, died a few years ago. Jodorowsky is 95. I don't know if he's still writing. Gore Vidal. Yeah, so it was the artist who died so it's a few years old, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so not everything. Okay, there's a German version here. So Ich der Drache. There's no French version. Oh, there is. Yeah, Moi Dragon. Here it is. 2010 in France. May have come out before in Spain. Okay, so this is a Lombard book. Okay, what? So the album's 56 pages, but there's a 170-page integral, but what does it have besides the story? I don't get it.
Eric P. says Previews has I, Dragons listed for December 11th release. Is that all 3? Because there's 3 issues. So I guess one's October, which is now November and December. So that might not be the whole thing. Looks like there was a Kickstarter for the book at some point.
Okay, so the
December 11, 24.
Now I get it. Okay, so let me see if I can find this in Tebeosfera, because the for some reason, the French only published the first graphic novel, but there's an integral which has 170 pages, so there's probably three stories in there. Yeah, it kind of looks like Matt Barron's, but it's probably not the same. So let me see here.
It's strange that like I said, I was like, why? It was funny too because there's this guy who I was thinking about buying it this week, but I bought a few other first issues instead. Once again, I did the math. I was like, $40 for 3 issues, maybe I'll buy the collected edition. But the guy who came in after me is a regular named Frank. And
it's sort of like the Matt Barron's. It's techno fantasy.
Yeah,
it's probably very well drawn, and the book will be worth it just for that.
And Frank is an older guy. He must be at least 75. But he buys a wide variety of stuff. And he actually picked up. There was only one copy out. I don't know if I have more in the back, but he actually picked the copy up. And I was like, "Oh, you got iDragon." It's like, and I started going, "I wonder why they bought that, European one over here." And he was like, "I don't know. I just read them." I'm like, "I wonder about it." He didn't wonder at all. He just reads them.
All right, so let me see.
Not sure if it's going to show up, but I did put a link for the preview solicitor. But I didn't see like I said, I don't think because I went on Amazon and looked for the collected edition and it wasn't there. So
there it
maybe
is.
I just missed it. Or
in Spain, there are they published the 3 books. So iDragon is a series. The first book is called The End of Genesis. The second one is called The Book of Iron, and the third is The Eternal Life.
Maybe they'll never put it in 1 volume. I don't know. Maybe they're coming out with 3 volumes just for the.
Well, if they use the French edition from Lombard as a basis, it would be 180 pages, including all 3 graphic novels, plus promo art and other materials used. All right, here it is. Yo Dragón, Grupo Norma Editorial. Genesis, the libro de hierro, la vida eterna. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's that type of thing that is good at, which is fantasy stories with technological details in the art.
Back to Bill Sienkiewicz. Gore Vidal says, if I remember correctly, Bill S. said he worked on Stray Toasters after his marriage broke up. He was telling a story after his he was drinking too much, and he broke his hand. I think it was by punching something. From the context of the story, I think he was drunk, angry, and punched something and broke his hand, his drawing hand. And after he broke his drawing hand, he realized all he ever wanted to do in life is draw. And here he now broke his drawing hand. So he gave up booze, he gave up red meat, he gave up his marriage, he gave up everything so he could get better and draw again. So I think he must have done Stray Toasters after that then. Stray Toasters was a scratchy crime murder drama. And also, I know this from a question in the audience from someone who must have known it. He, for some reason, has a collection of toasters. He loves toaster. He also said in his origin story is when he went to a technical high school where he learned electronics and learned to wire things, which he still has a fascination with in his art, which is where he puts wiring diagrams and stuff like that in his art sometimes. And so because of that, he also has a fascination with toasters, and he has a fascination with toasters that work differently than other. He describes some of his. He said he's got like 40 toasters. Some toasters where you put the bread in this end and it moves the toast along the heated elements and comes out as toast on the other end, and toasters where you put it on the top and it slowly drops down and comes out at the side as toast. He loves the idea of these machines that do one thing but are engineered differently to do this one thing. So I think his love of toasters probably had something to do with stray toasters also.
Yeah.
"62 Lefty said, I picked up iDragon, ordered the Jimenez collection from the last previews." Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of good.
Was it a collection of all three?
There's a collection of all three in French, but I don't know how many. I don't know how much Juan Jimenez is available in English. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. I have a couple of his graphic novels that were published in French. I also have a collection of a series which he and Ricardo Barreiro did in an Italian comic called The City, and I have a Spanish market edition of that. But there's a lot of cool stuff. Actually, his most famous series is about an aviation hero. It's called Ace of Spades.
Let me quickly show you a Brian Boland cover. I don't think I've seen a Brian Boland cover in a while, let alone on an indie comic. But it's a horror anthology. I liked it, but I mostly just want to show you the Brian Boland cover. Joe Pruitt, who was, I think, he's mostly been a business guy in comics, but he's also a writer. He wrote this. I think he was also one of the main guys behind Aftershock. But just wanted to show you that quickly and show you the last issue of Hate Revisited was out. Terrific stuff. And the last issue of Grendel, Devil's Crucible, Defiance, but it's really a to be continued in the next miniseries. Have you've been reading this Grendel miniseries online or anything?
Yeah.
Have you read this issue?
Yep.
Nice revelation at the end, which is really a to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
But figured I'd quickly throw those out. Well, yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz it was a nice talk. I think all the students really liked him, appreciated him. Told stories about his. He's actually having a piece sent up into space at the International Space Station. You can find it on his Twitter. It's Space Batman with the International in like an armored spacesuit with the International Space Station behind him, because his studio manager, I think her name was Susan, is also a science writer. So one of her science friends, I think with NASA, said, hey, we're looking for an artist because we want to include artists on our next trip to the International Space Station and do something with an artist. And so she she said, I know just the guy. So she got Bill to do it. And he was, have a good night. Have a good night, Eric. And he was describing what it was like to do something that's going to go into space, because he had to give them a list of everything. First of all, every gram counted. And he had to give them the list of everything every art supply he used on the piece, and they had to break it all down into component parts to make sure nothing unsafe was going up. He even at one time commented, the iDragon graphic novel available to reorder on Dead. I just don't know if it's all in, because there's three like graphic album volumes. I just don't know if they're collecting it all in one. So I think that one might be the one that came out this week. But I'll have to see. But it was like he was describing, and he even said at one time he was going to do it on wrapping paper because it's so light and thin. But he ended up not. I was like, oh, it's interesting hearing about, doing work for NASA. Good stuff. Oh, here's one other thing I wanted to mention. I wanted to bring up because I had never thought, and Bill Sienkiewicz would probably fit in this. I was reading some of the John Romita interview in here from like 2004. Let me see if I can find it. He says something interesting that I had never thought of before. Come on, where'd it go? I want to quote him directly so I don't mess up. Volume 2, Volume 3 come out November 13th. Yep, I'm looking for all 3 volumes in one because they're basically in like a graphic album right now.
That'll probably cost something like $50.
It's going to cost, which means you can get it for $35 on Amazon, which is less than, or my shop too.
Or you can get the French version, but that'll probably cost more to get it to the United States. And you'd have to learn French.
Huh. Here we go. Oh, as an aside, before I read this quote, Bill Sienkiewicz was telling a story. Once again, I think it was right after he got divorced, where he did a cover for New Mutants, one with a woman in the center who's kind of really heavy. It's got strings, literal strings attached to these characters. And he said he brought it into the office. And at one point, Virginia Romita was like, that looks just like your ex-girlfriend. And he was like, holy cow, I didn't know that. But I think Virginia Romita gets short shrift when everybody kind of and I think everybody kind of describes her because she's John Romita's wife. She, in the comic world, she's always going to be second fiddle to John Romita. And when people like Bill referred to her working at Marvel too, when they refer to her working at Marvel, they always give her short shrift, probably because they don't even know. But she was the traffic manager and the production manager, just like John Verporten was, just like I think Danny Crespi was only the production manager. But she had real power there. And she kept all the trains running on. She was a kind of an important person at Marvel. But she never gets referred to it as that. She always gets referred to as John Romita's wife. And that always kind of annoys me a little when I hear it. But just because I heard that when Bill was no one ever means to do it, but people just don't know what Virginia Romita really did at Marvel, besides be John Romita's wife. But here's the quote. Okay. The interviewer asks him, what's the one thing out of the comic book business that you've gotten that has enriched your life? And John Romita says, it's funny. I never looked for enrichment. I realized in retrospect that that was lacking in my generation. We were only in it to make a buck. I envy the generation that came in the 90s, in the late 80s, in the 90s. I will say that the generation that came in the 70s was a disappointment to me. I don't want to name names, but those guys got into comics and then left comics to go into posters, advertising, and whatever else illustration. I can't fault them for trying to make themselves better, but they failed us because the generation we expected to fill the gap in the 70s never showed up. So we jumped to the late 80s and 90s, and there's a whole group of foreign artists, local artists, college graduate artists, the Walt Simonson type, the Todd McFarlane approach, the Lob Liefeld kind of guy. They came into comics with nowhere near the approach we had. We had only, let's make a buck, and when the comic industry dies, we'll all throw a party and get into something else. I swear I never had a feeling that I needed gratification. But I will tell you before I finish what I did find out later. But these guys, I envy them because they came in with a mission to do comics. They wanted to do comics. They wanted to stay in comics as opposed to us. They were dedicated to making comics better. Whatever they succeeded or failed, whether they succeeded or failed is another question, but they cared about comics more than we ever did. We all had the John Buscema approach on comics. It's crap. We're only doing it for a buck. And when we're out of it, we're happier. You know, that kind of stuff. Sometimes that's overstated and a curmudgeonly kind of joke. But I do envy and respect those later guys. Even though I don't always like their work. I respect them because they cared about making comics better and better, and they succeeded in changing comics. I don't know if it was a good or bad. I'll leave that to history, but I will tell you what happened to me. I always felt frustrated when I was 35 to 40. I felt like a failure. I felt like, what am I doing? I'm doing the same stuff over and over again. Why don't I get out? Why don't I go into storyboards? I don't know if that was the answer, but I thought I'd make more money, whatever. But Virginia kept telling me not to be despondent. She kept saying, what are you worried about? You're doing good stuff. I suddenly woke up one day and realized, what am I complaining about? I'm getting steady work. I'm telling stories that are getting responses from people. People are telling me they love my stories. And I suddenly realized, why do I have to become a magazine illustrator or a painter to get satisfaction? But I found that interesting, him being disappointed with the guys in the 70s, even though Walt Simonson was around in the 70s. I think he had, some of his years were off a little. But I think, because when I started thinking about it, and I think like the guys he maybe was a little disappointed in was like Neil Adams was like the only one of his generation.
It's the late 60s guy. So it's Neil Adams,
Barry Smith,
Jim Steranko.
Who was with Barry Smith in the studio? Mike Kaluta, even. All those guys who were really talented, but like he said, went out, left comics. They were there briefly in the 70s. Neil Adams, of course, dabbled in comics.
Sure. I suppose if they had a spirit more like Richard Corbin, I mean, right. Corbin had to create his own method of distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guys weren't up to it.
No.
Who goes into comics wanting to become a pro and then finding out that, okay, I have to change the industry in a way that I can get. Nobody thinks that.
Huh. But he name drops Walter Simonson. And I'm betting that like Bill Sienkiewicz would be in there too. Jim Starlin was another guy who dropped out for a good long time. Howard Chaykin dropped out for a good long time. A lot of them were back in the 90s.
Howard dropped out in the 80s.
Right. That's what I mean. He was one of those 70s guys who dropped out.
Right. Okay, so Kaluta drops out in the 80s, but okay, so Barry Smith drops out in 1972 and then only comes back in like 1980.
Right. They came back much later.
And then he quit. And then he quits again. But
I never thought about that. A lot of those good 70s guys, late 60s, early 70s guys did drop out.
Still, I don't think it's dropping out. It's that case of your editors disappear and nobody's hiring you anymore.
I'm saying why they dropped out is a whole other thing. But they were like Walter Simonson never disappeared. Bill Sienkiewicz, I don't think he ever really dropped out, but he did. He got more illustration stuff, but I don't know where to put him. And of course, by the time the 80s rolled around, all the young guys who stuck around for a while, even Michael Golden dropped out for a good long time, and he was the 70s and the early 80s.
Michael Golden was an office guy now. So of course he was.
Yeah, it's just something I never really thought about before.
Because that's what happens when you. I mean, John Romita was still drawing the newspaper strip, but Michael Golden didn't even have time for that.
Yeah, he was making plenty of money commercially. He had tons of commercial art, which is what all the guys did. They went into better paying fields in general. A lot of them went to animation in the West Coast.
Where did Dave Cockrum go? I mean, Cockrum didn't have that grandiose style that Jake and Kaluta Simonson had. He was much more traditional.
Right.
Even though his storytelling was, I mean, like Mike Grell. Mike Grell was a good complement to replace Cockrum because Grell was a fan of newspaper strips, and he ended up working in one. But Cockrum sort of disappears after 1986.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Cockrum. He could have had health problems, because I know he had health problems later on in life.
Yeah.
And health problems and monthly comics do not go together. No way.
No. Or did he do one of those things that appeared in the back of previews that reached issue number 100, but nobody cared?
I think he was doing some work. He may have been doing some Elvira work, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Was there something called Claypool Comics?
Yes. That's who put out Elvira and other things. He may have been doing stuff for them. I don't know how much. But I think Bob Wyacek inked him on some of that stuff.
Right, because that thing goes way under the radar. It's one of those publishers who survived the 90s boom and bust. Never took advantage of the 90s boom. Survived the 90s bust, sort of. I mean, I think they lasted longer than Caliber.
Yeah, Claypool was around for a long time. Let me show you the other big book I got this week. Sigil, a cross-gen book from Marvel. Omnibus. Nice. And I bought a lot of cross-gen stuff back when they were coming out. This was one of the ones I didn't get. And I've kind of always wanted to fill in my cross-gen stuff that I was missing. And if you remember, I think I've mentioned sometime over the last couple of weeks that I was saving up Amazon credit card points to get that Hate box set, which I've been meaning to buy for 3 years now. But there's always something I get instead of it. I got this instead of it. I had enough money. Like, I ended up paying, using credit card points to get this. But it was also in that sweet spot where 15 years ago, if I wanted to buy like a complete set of 42 issues of this, it would probably run me around $50-$60. Now it'll probably run me around $60-$70. It's not like they're not expensive comics, but it's a good chunk of change and shipping sometimes goes up, and shipped 42 issues isn't always cheap. So Marvel actually put this out last year. The original retail price on it was $125. I was not going to pay $125 for this. So right. I don't know. And by the way, this is the first Marvel omnibus I've bought since 2014. I was like, wow, it's been that long since I bought one. And I only have 2 Marvel omnibuses left. I probably sold 6 of them I bought over the years. That I was like, I don't want this anymore. And they're ones that were out of print, so I got a good price for them. But I notice with stuff like this, let's just call them the less desirable omnibuses. I notice there's a sweet spot for them. They come out at $125, you know, what, 115 at a discount place, maybe somewhere around 100, whatever. But then if it's not Spider-Man or Captain America, the price slowly drops on it until it gets to a point where I'm willing to pay for it. This was 65 plus tax. I think it was 73 I paid for this. All with my hate box set credit card points, which I'll have to save up some more credit card points to get that hate set. But I already have the complete hate, so it's like not the. I just want the. It almost seems like so self-indulgent that I want the box set. But I noticed that once these sort of like less desirable ones bottom out and go out of print, they slowly start to rise again until like 5 years later, people want absurd amounts of money for them. So I was like, ooh, I think I'm in the sigil sweet spot, so I'll pick it up. I can't wait to read this one. This is the one. Have you ever read any cross-gen stuff?
Yeah, mostly Ruse.
Ruse is very good.
Yeah, and I read Route 666 once.
That's the one I just finished up. It was pretty good.
No, it wasn't Route 666. It was Way of the Rat.
Way of the Rat. Yeah, that one was pretty good. That was one I collected. But anyway, usually this is one of the first 6, I think, the very first one. And this is sort of the sci-fi military guy who gets, the superpower. And I think he's in the middle of some war between Earthlings and these lizard people. I read like maybe half a dozen issues of it back in the day. I don't really remember. Samadal Ray is something like that is his name. Sam. When Sam suddenly receives the sigil, a mark burned in his chest that grants him access to vast power. It makes him a deadly weapon, but also a target. Against a backdrop of war between the Planetary Union and the Saurians, Sam and his ragtag crew must travel the cosmos, battling their enemies and trying to unravel the mystery of the sigil. So I'm really looking forward to this one. There's a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in this one for me. So it's, one of the cross-gen, and they actually just this year came out with the other series I didn't buy. What was the name of it? It was the magic-based one. Oh, I can't remember the name. I think I got the first trade of that, but that one just came out in September. So maybe next year I'll get that one. Huh. I got to save up for Shade the Changing Man omnibus. Yeah. That was a big book. It was, Liz. It was very big. I like that one. Oh, and the other one I got the other trade I got was I picked this one up off, I can't remember if I got it used off of Amazon or eBay. Plastic. This is the first collaboration by writer Doug Wagner and art by Daniel Hilliard. I bought their last 3 collaborations, including Plastic Death and Dolls, which just ended. Was it last week or the week before? I think the week before. I must have showed you that one. And that turns out was a prequel and leads into this one. So I was like, I may as well get this one. It was like $10. So I was like, looks like it's even got the store sticker on it. Wherever I think I got this used eBay or Amazon, one or the other. But I read the first couple issues in it. It was pretty good stuff. Mm-hmm. You read anything lately, Paulo?
Well, I reread Watchmen, so we could do the Watchmen video.
Did you read the whole Watchmen or do the text?
Yeah, I read the whole Watchmen. I don't think I can read Watchmen without reading everything.
Okay.
Because the first time I read Watchmen, I read the text pieces. So the second time I read Watchmen,
I know I read them the first time. I probably didn't.
And when I reread it when I reread it, I had to reread the text pieces as well, because I don't think the story makes sense to me without the text pieces. But they're not made. They're not made so you have to read them. They're made
Right.
because they're there because it makes sense. And some of those things, they wouldn't have worked as a comic. Like the article on Dr. Manhattan and the Adrian Veidt interview. It works well as the interview. You wouldn't have done a comic story with the interview. It just wouldn't have worked.
Mm-hmm. Shade the Changing Man floppies are too costly nowadays. Yeah, I don't think I've ever read Shade the Changing Man.
They are. That doesn't make any sense.
That was one I didn't. Oh, did you see the big announcement that Vertigo is back?
Oh yeah. Back to do
What
what
he
exactly?
do?
Yeah. I mean, okay. With what?
They just moved one of their Black Label books over to Vertigo, so I don't know. I guess the Black Label is not successful as an imprint, so they're like, "Hey, let's bring back Vertigo."
It isn't, but they kind of. I understand that they wanted to do something that was not specifically creator owned, where they could use their well-known brands, but do something a little off market. But they got too dependent on Batman.
Yeah.
They had, but and then we get to the other problem. Nobody talked about the line itself. You can't get people to talk about the line, and that cuts it off quickly. So the same is going to happen to Vertigo. I mean, it's like the last time they tried to bring back Vertigo, and it didn't seem very interesting to talk about.
It just, it's funny. Must be 2 weeks ago now. I just happened to see a post on Facebook from Marie Javins, and it was something about her. I have no idea what the context is, besides DC Comics, and it was something about her scolding people for repeating unfounded rumors or something like that about comics and DC, and I was just like, there's tilting at windmills, trying to get people not to gossip. And it's like, I really was like, oh, I wonder what she's talking about. Then I was like, I don't want to spend the time trying to find out. So there was some rumor going around about DC a couple weeks ago about something. I was like, I wonder if it was new Vertigo. A new Vertigo. What new story they gonna tell? Good question. Batwang ruined Black Label. Batwang made Black Label.
Yeah,
they ruined it by not giving us more Batwang.
Yeah.
Because that's what the fans wanted, obviously.
Right. Yeah, ultimately too much Batman. But I really don't know. I mean, it's not like DC's not looking specifically for creator-owned series.
No.
And you can't just be offbeat. You have to. When the Vertigo line launched, there was a certain aesthetic to the entire line, and then it branched off from that. But they kind of all looked similar enough when it started, and that was missing now, I guess. Was missing the previous time. It was missing on the last Vertigo relaunch. It was missing on Black Label. Something that unifies the line.
I have no idea what it's going to be. I think the only thing they announced was that House by the Lake one. Is I think their first Vertigo book, but it's already a Black Label book, so it's like, okay.
And Daniel Warren Johnson stuff.
That'd fit in. Let's see, what else do I got this week? The latest issue of Babs, Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows, a good issue. I liked that. I think that was my favorite. That's the one that's kind of a comedy barbarian story, but it's also kind of making fun of fanboys and MAGA. So it's kind of amusing. Space Usagi. This is a reprint. Came out like 94. But the first time it's in color. But what's interesting about the color, it's reminding me a lot of some Von Baudet stuff just because of the desert colors. And Stan Sakai's line, which is kind of pen line Von Baudet-ish. But just seeing this in color really made it look different and sort of like Von Baudet. Let's see what else we get. Here's one of the first issues I got. Null Hunter. It was okay. I can't even remember what it was about right now. But it was all right. That now that I see that logo on screen, it reminds me of a 70s logo. Like something from Atlas Comics.
Yep. What if Jim Starlin had done an Seaboard Atlas? That's it.
This one wasn't bad. This is a Scott Koblish cover, which is the reason I got it. And this is like the X-Files Avengers. Cap and a bunch of Avengers have now... Cap reopened. This is issue 2. I only bought it because of the Scott Koblish cover. But Cap reopened Avengers Mansion and now has like a team there 24 hours to respond to emergencies. So this emergencies were ghost apes were taking over a town. So they had to go to the town and bust the ghost apes. And it was a done in one story. So it was all right. I got to say, who wrote it? The whiteout guy, right?
Greg Rucka?
No. Steve Orlando. He's not the whiteout guy. He's the something else guy. Something like whiteout.
Wasn't Steve Orlando the guy who ruined Aquaman?
I don't remember. Scott Eaton is the penciler, but nice, a solid done in one book. Let's see SBPT is looking forward to the Black Canary Black Label. I don't want Vertigo to just license, but I don't know what Vertigo's doing. Latest issue of the Goon, always good. Eric Powell stuff. Latest issue of the Creep Show, Volume 3, Number 2. Horror anthology. I'm enjoying that. Latest issue, Number 4 of Paranoid Gardens. Chris Weston artwork is terrific in this supernatural rest home that's horror-ish. Issue 2 of the Tin Can Society. This is about the group of friends who one grew up to be a scientist and invented stuff to help out people who had physical disabilities, and then created a suit of armor for reasons he really couldn't explain, because he created a suit of armor because he could. And he needed the legs too to help. He already built legs to help himself walk, as you can see but then someone murdered him in the first issue. So that's been interesting. Rifters is our Time Cops. I've liked this issue better than the last couple. Grim 20 continues to be good with our Grim Reaper woman and stories of behind the scenes of the afterlife. The end of the double issue Radiant Black stories. The end of what's the name of this? The Catalyst War Part 10. It's been their big story. Department of Truth gives us a Marilyn Monroe issue where the hook is she might be fictional. Because this is the one where the more people believe in conspiracies, the conspiracies become... So if enough people believe in Bigfoot, Bigfoot manifests and has always been there. It rewrites history. Well, it turns out that, she's a famous sex symbol, but she may never have really existed before. So we don't know yet, but that's kind of where the story is headed right now, because there's a whole thing with she never had an affair with JFK, but so many people believe it that she now has memory. She's all confused because she has memories of having an affair with JFK, even though she knows it never happened. So one of the Department of Truth agents was sent there to see what was going on and look after her. And he came to the conclusion that she just might be fictional. And he's the guy who puts down fictional monsters. So we can see where this is headed. Well, that's a big pile of books for 2 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 books in 2 weeks. That's 9 a week. That's a fair amount for me, especially with these. And I also, did you see the video I made? Whoops. About this one over here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the artist edition of the EC Comics covers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were talking about the amount of detail, and I always wondered how much detail would be too much to justify working on it given the page rate.
Exactly. That's a good. I know that EC Comics paid they paid the highest page rates in the business. So I imagine that had them do. I actually want to make some. I'm going to grab my handheld camera and try to make some videos up close of some of the detail. And see if I can find a digital version of the full color and print it out so I can compare and contrast too. I'll have to see if I can pull that off. Oh, all right. Well, we're getting around wrap-up time.
Mm-hmm. And Wilson never got back.
No,
in
he
time.
Didn't get home. Maybe he after class he probably went out with whoever was sponsoring him, because that's what happens sometimes. It used to happen to me before I taught, when I had friends who were teaching who were like, "You want to come into my class?" Like Wilson's teaching a 1-day lettering class, and then the teacher who brought you in usually take you out to dinner or something. You hang out. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that's going on. So we'll have to catch him next week.
He still has to tell us how our New York City Comic Con
went. Yeah. We got to get the report we'll get that next week, I guess.
Yeah.
Huh. All right. So everybody out there, have a good night. Here's some balloons and confetti for you. And we'll catch you all next week.
Bye.